It's 5 a.m. in upstate New York, and an arriving truck driver has just pulled their personal vehicle into the parking lot of Walmart Distribution Center 6096 in Johnstown. Now, dispatch doesn't have them due to leave until 6, but because it's their first day of the week, effectively their Monday, our driver has a to-do list to check through before hitting the road. First, laundry. For fleet drivers, distribution centers, or DCs, function as home bases, facilities where they can get paperwork from dispatchers, grab coffee, cook a meal, even take a shower. After a locker room stop for fresh uniforms for the week, it's to the dispatch office to find out the day's itinerary and which trailer they're hooking at which dock. Paperwork secure, now to the truck. Our driver does not own the truck they drive for Walmart, but rather is assigned one. And being off for the last 2 days, another driver has been using it. This, in the industry, is called slip seating. So our driver needs to make a detailed pre-trip assessment of the vehicle, checking everything from the 100 lug nuts for tightness to the truck's seatbelt for fraying, along with a long list of visual and physical inspections around the truck to make sure it's in safe working condition. Truck in good standing, trailer hooked, it's time to roll, for a few hundred feet or so. Another safety measure now at the gate in the form of a weight check. Carrying pallets of dry food, the trailer shouldn't be sneaking up on any legal limits, but it's still required to check. After clearing the gate, our trucker is off just before 6. Finally, they're free to start earning some money. Trucking for Walmart, or really for any company, is compensated not by time, but by distance and what's completed within that time. It's by and large a job by the mile. At a rate on the low end of Walmart's range due to the regional scope of their job, our driver pulls into the back of the Evans Mill Walmart Supercenter at around 9 a.m., some $68.75 richer. A comparatively open lot with 6 separate truck docks, this could be a relatively quick in and out, too. An opportunity to get back on the road and earning fast. But with the morning vendors still clogging up the lot, our driver is slowed and can't unload their pallets until 9:30. But they aren't too fussed because they're still getting paid. See, Walmart doesn't just pay by the mile, it also pays by the stop, and each live load, the process of unloading, is compensated at $12.50. Should it take longer than 45 minutes to get in and out, then Walmart will pay our driver a delay fee of $14 per hour. With the day still young, with 2 stops to make, and now, communicated from dispatch to the driver's onboard tablet, a new trailer to pick up from the distribution center at the end of the day, our driver is back on the road. After 2 uneventful stops, 2 more live loads, and 86 more miles compiled, our driver now heads with an empty trailer back to Johnstown. But now, a decision to make. Hook the new trailer and head back out, or call it a day and inform dispatch they'll overnight at the DC and depart in the morning. For their part, Walmart doesn't care, as the load will get to the store by the next day regardless, so it's largely the trucker's call, the chance to be their own boss. But a hurdle. Our driver is destined to time out soon. After taking a federally mandated 30-minute break in Oswego, they're looking at pulling out of the DC at 5 p.m., 12 hours after their day started, and only 2 hours until their day is timed out by federal law. Ultimately, though, the status of their next trailer makes the decision for them. This particular load is not a dry van, it's a refrigerated trailer, a reefer, as they're called, and during the pre-trip inspection, the driver finds that it's broken. A delay that will cost the driver 2.5 hours of time, but on the positive, net them $35 in delay fees. So for the day, the driver pushed 405 miles at 55 cents per, hooked twice at $10 per, dropped 1 trailer at $11.50 per, made 3 arrivals and live unloads at $11.50 and $12.50 per respectively, and by staying in the truck overnight made 1 layover fee of $42. All this, plus the delay fees at the end of the day, netted our driver $403.25 for day 1. A solid start to the week. The next few days will look a bit different. The driver will be assigned to haul all the way down to Long Island, where they'll be paid a $50 bridge fee for the hassle of navigating the Throngs Neck Bridge and its traffic. They'll flip from reefer back to dry goods and make some more nearby stops, and ultimately, they'll make about the same on the daily totals. And at the end of their week, on day 5, they'll park the truck at the distribution center and head home for 2 days of rest. In the trucking industry, this regional driving job for Walmart's private fleet represents a good job. The pay is competitive, as Walmart advertises a starting pay in the 6 figures, a number that seems high in an industry mired by a general lack of salary clarity, but one that's verified by the host of drivers who speak and post their earnings across trucking social media. The job is also flexible as drivers set the end of their own workdays. It offers some semblance of work-life balance in an industry that has little of it, as these jobs are most often 5 days on, 2 days off. And crucially, it compensates drivers beyond just mileage, ensuring that the entirety of their work, the unloading, the navigating slow and dangerous choke points, Even the lost time for unforeseen breakdowns all get paid. It's simply a good job, but maybe not a great one. In an industry that's historically romanticized the freedom of the open road and attracted a free-spirited crowd, Walmart keeps a close eye on its fleet. In 2022, the company installed tracking tablets in its 9,000 trucks. They say it allows them flexibility and precision in managing load arrivals and timing. Drivers feel it allows the company means to monitor speeding. Dash cams have spurred a similar reaction. The company says they're there to protect drivers, but some drivers feel they're an invasion of privacy. And while not a stated policy, there's rumor that Walmart officials often monitor their drivers' pre-trip checks and generally micromanage the lot. To some drivers, it's all too much. To others, it's the price you pay to drive for pretty fair compensation and a steady job. All jobs have downsides though, and this one is no different. It's not perfect for most, but it's good. Thing is, it's a really hard one to get. Whether Walmart micromanages its fleet or is just really on top of its logistics game is a matter of opinion, but what's objective is that the process of landing one of these fleet jobs is onerous. On top of a commercial driver's license, prospective employees ideally have years of experience, they need a practically spotless driving record, and then they need to pass a company physical along with a host of additional classroom and on-the-road trainings with the company. This is the current state of trucking in the US in a nutshell. There are some good jobs, but they're increasingly hard to come by and increasingly competitive to secure. What is now considered good used to just be the norm. The earliest days of the American long-haul trucking industry better paralleled the stagecoach industry than trucking of today. West of the Mississippi, there were no highways, routes were indirect, and service stations were few and far between. The roads were rural and the trucks were rudimentary, traveling at speeds that topped out at 40 miles per hour and experiencing constant malfunctions like tire blowouts and engines overheating. As World War I loomed, the movement of military supplies became critical to American participation, and railroads couldn't handle it alone, so industry advancements occurred quickly. Fifth wheels were introduced to trucks, which standardized their size. Diesel engines ushered in a new era of efficiency, with 25 to 30% more miles per gallon, and pneumatic tires decreased damage to both the trucks and the goods they carried. By 1920, there were 1 million trucks on America's roads. As technology evolved and infrastructure improved, the industry around it did too, and the government needed to catch up. To do this, the Interstate Commerce Act was amended with the Motor Carrier Act of 1935, largely spearheaded by the railroad industry, which was losing business to what they considered an unregulated transportation market in trucking. Key pieces of the legislation standardized trucking rates and required companies to have certificates. Companies previously in operation, like Alco, were grandfathered in though, and automatically awarded a certificate, making it very difficult for any new carriers to enter the market. They had to prove there was a need not being met to even be considered. The United Parcel Service, which started in Seattle in 1907 with deliveries on foot and bicycle, ultimately benefited from this legislation. When the company was founded, it specialized in retail deliveries exclusively in Seattle and eventually in Oakland, California. But as it expanded to here and here and here, introducing consolidated carrier shipping, it eventually fell into the jurisdiction of the ICC. So when the 1935 Act was introduced, UPS had a unique grasp on several key markets in the United States, and it held on to that tightly over the decades when others couldn't directly compete. Additionally, rate bureaus were set up to standardize regional transport costs and to restrict what a truck could actually carry, paralleling similar regulations in the rail industry. Truckers were told what they could carry, where they could carry it, and how much they could charge for that service. So this farmer in Florida, for example, was allowed to transport their own fruits and vegetables to Cincinnati, Ohio, but could not carry alcohol from a company in Covington, Ohio back to Florida because he wasn't permitted to take loads for hire and, as a produce carrier, was not allowed to transport alcohol. What started as a way to control the market and even the playing field to the benefit of both drivers and companies ultimately made trucking more expensive for the consumer. Freight rates were an estimated 1/3 to half higher due to the regulations. Frustrations mounted, but then everything changed in the era of deregulation. The Motor Carrier Act of 1980 represented an almost full repeal of all regulations set more than 4 decades earlier. Now truckers could drive where they wanted, transporting what they wanted, and charging more or less for it. And new carriers could enter the market with essentially unfettered access, and a new era in American trucking was born. Workers flocked to the industry. The number of truckers nearly doubled between 1977 and 1996, from 1.1 million to 1.9 million, and at the same time, the number of distinct trucking companies also quickly grew from around 20,000 in 1980 to more than 500,000 in 2024. The floodgates opened on the industry, and while it was awash in labor and employment options, the sharp increase in competition led to lower wages and a loss in union power. Though consumers and companies benefited from cheaper prices and an explosive growth market, it all came at a cost to one party in particular: the drivers. In this flooded, lightly regulated post-1980 reality, there exists a fundamental and unshakable paradox. Trucking has never been so in demand in the US, and yet it has never been such a bad job. Trucking can be classified in a few different ways. By distance, from local to long haul; by load, from fracking sands for oil fields to consumer goods from warehouses; by carrier, from one-person operation to a slip-seat fleet; or by licensure, CDL Class A, B, or C. But to understand what happened to the job itself, it's best to consider how a trucker of any classification files their taxes, whether they're getting a 1099 or a W-2. In 2022, there were a total of 3.5 million truckers in the US. Of that, 1.7 million, or nearly half, were owner-operators. That means they're truckers in the most mythologized Wild West style imaginable. They own and maintain their rigs, they make their own schedules, and carry what they want to when they want to. They're their own boss. Or at least in theory. Today, trucks are prohibitively expensive and consumer demands are greater than ever. Precision and speed in logistics are no longer add-on benefits, they're assumed qualities. So of the 1.7 million owner-operators, only 44% actually drive under their own direct authority, while 45% lease their time to a motor carrier company. This means 765,000 truckers, or over 20% of the entire workforce, call themselves owner-operators or independent contractors, but are working directly with a logistics company capable of coordinating the demanding and complicated delivery network while providing the containers, chassis, and sometimes even the trucks to get the deliveries done. And here the lines get blurred, and truckers often lose out. Take XPO Logistics, for example. Their business model relies on an asset-light approach where short-distance trucking is largely taken care of by independent contractors. This affords the company flexibility, as it can hire on and cut its fleets with less red tape. But more importantly, this saves the company a ton of money. XPO Logistics doesn't have to pay for any benefits, they don't have to insure, maintain, or even pay for the gas for the trucks they're relying on. They just have to cover an agreed-upon hourly or per-mile fee with the driver. In many ways, this represents the opposite of the Walmart approach. One invests in employees and provides benefits to maintain a steady, well-trained driver base. The other keeps their commitments to drivers minimal under the assumption that there will always be a strong supply of independent, individual operators. Both are effectively responses to the industry's post-1980 reality, that anyone can enter the business as an owner-operator so long as they can secure a CDL. The downsides of the leased-out independent contractor approach are most acutely felt in America's largest ports. Driving cargo freight from a boat in Long Beach Harbor to a warehouse somewhere east of LA as an independent contractor, for instance, is nothing short of a bad job. Average port traffic is usually an hour plus, navigating the port can be difficult, getting in the wrong queue can result in hours of additional delay, bathrooms can be hard to find, and all the time a trucker is sitting, waiting, and burning fuel, they aren't getting paid. During the COVID-fueled consumer boom where docks and ports were making daily news because of stacking delays, drivers were waiting up to 6 hours to pick up their freight, at which point they'd get turned around at the docks because they wouldn't be able to deliver within the 11-hour driving window. A workday with expenses, but no pay. While traffic has normalized since, the job hardly produced a living wage before the pandemic. For an independent contractor with costs factored in, this 2019 California Berkeley study put the median income for a port driver at just $28,000 a year. Brutal for a job that almost certainly far exceeds the standard 40-hour workweek. For a decade now, labor groups, the Teamsters, drivers, and lawyers have been questioning the notion as to whether it's even fair to call these employees independent contractors to begin with. Their work for companies like XPO, after all, with rigorous and specific requirements, with truck tracking and XPO-owned chassis, doesn't seem so independent, they argue. Recently, courts have come to agree, and legislators have worked to address this. But beyond the settlements that XPO has paid out over misclassification, or the attention it has garnered from the federal government, perhaps the clearest indicator that much of independent trucking has turned into just a flat-out bad job is the turnover. Trucking has a staggering 90% turnover rate at large long-haul carriers. 90% of drivers leave a given company within a given year, so while legally dubious to outright illegal misclassification explains some of the industry's issues, it's more structural than that. Far from the California coast and deep in West Texas is the Permian Basin, the very heart of America's boom-bust oil and fracking industry. Generally, the oil industry requires a lot of sand, which requires a lot of trucks to move sand from mine to rig. And within this A to B process appears a clear misalignment in incentives between truck drivers and truck employers. As the job postings would suggest, employers need a lot more truckers in the basin. And for their part, they're offering staggering pay ranges, some listed at $25,000 a month or $9,000 a week. But those numbers are rough estimations under the most generous interpretation. Looking at more details, IBS Teams, for example, infers that a driver could make $1,200 a day, so in theory they could get close to pulling $8,500 in a particularly productive week. That's, of course, a massive number, and one that doesn't take into consideration any externalities of the cost burden on the driver. It doesn't need to factor in externalities, though. In fact, the company posting the job is under no obligation to provide an accurate salary because they're looking for independent contractors or drivers who are their own bosses. They're just posting an upper range for a particularly productive driver on a particularly productive week. But it turns out that Permian Basin truckers aren't clearing $25,000 a month, they're protesting. In the summer of 2024, they started blocking entrances to sand mines to stop traffic and hand out flyers. It was a grassroots revolution over working conditions. There are no restrooms at the mines or the oil fields. And more important to truckers' bottom line, they're getting stuck in way too many traffic jams. They're waiting 2 to 24 uncompensated hours to drop their loads off at wellheads or pick up their loads at the mine. They aren't pulling six figures, they're barely scraping by. In such a massive boom-bust economy that is the Permian Basin, there just isn't the infrastructure nor organization to ensure that truck operations go smoothly, so there's no way to run enough loads or accumulate enough mileage to really make the economics work. But there's also really no incentive to fix it either. Oil companies, the mines, and the third-party logistics companies can just bring in more owner-operators. And from their perspective, a line of waiting trucks means that the oil field's demands are being met, and should a discontented driver flee for greener pastures, another driver with a CDL and 30-year-old secondhand truck bolstered by self-belief and a big number in a job listing will replace them. Given the complaints of truck drivers that the uncompensated lines they sit in have never been longer, that the resources available to truckers have never been more strained, it seems odd that there's a trucking shortage in the US and that this trucking shortage is only getting worse. The heavy competition for good jobs, along with the prevalence of wage-deflating misclassification, the high turnover, and the general dissatisfaction with the job, suggests that perhaps there's actually only a lack in decent trucking jobs. But not all would agree, as the explanation of the shortage differs dramatically depending on who you talk to or where you get your news. But what's inarguable is that change, equal parts inevitable and revolutionary, is on the horizon. In late 2024, the Permian Basin marked a milestone for autonomous trucking with the commercial launch of 2 fully driverless sand hauling trucks running routes along quiet, private roads. Not far behind, a rival company has set its sights on fully autonomous trucking back and forth between Houston and Dallas starting in April 2025. With the upsides so glaringly obvious with automation, the cost savings, the heightened efficiency, even the potential step up in safety, trucking is destined to go driverless in the near future. But that future won't replace the current realities overnight. Automation will progress incrementally through fits and starts, while trucking will remain a narrowing occupation. As that occurs, what remains to be seen is whether the industry is able to maintain and expand the share of good-paying fleet jobs and the sliver of profitable owner-operator setups, or if the specter of automation only furthers the worsening conditions of the industry. That much remains a very human question. Another industry that has gotten just markedly worse through time is the razor industry. Since the 1970s, it has transitioned mostly to selling multi-blade disposable razors, which work worse, cost more, and lead to a lot of plastic waste. According to a recent study, about 2/3 of men expect some irritation when they shave, leading many people to choose to either not shave or use less effective and more expensive electric shavers. That's something our sponsor, Henson Shaving, is trying to fix. Their razors are proven to cause less irritation in men. They go back to a more old-school single-blade design, yet with a design and manufacturing process made possible by modern technology. They make their all-aluminum razor in an aerospace machine shop in Canada that also made parts for the International Space Station. This precision allows for the blade to extend a mere 0.0013 inches, less than the width of a human hair, which is part of what cuts down on skin irritation. But the fact that they use standard double-edged blades helps a lot too, because they're cheap, about 10 cents per, meaning you can replace them frequently as soon as they get even slightly dull without breaking the bank or creating tons of waste. I personally have super sensitive skin and thought I could never use a manual razor until trying Henson. It's seriously the only manual razor that I've ever tried that hasn't been massively uncomfortable, and I was amazed at just how much better the shave quality was relative to what I was used to from electric shavers. If you want to change the way you shave, go to hensonshaving.com/Wendover and enter code WENDOVER at checkout to get 100 free blades with your purchase.